Right, so welcome to another video. This one is a little different in that it's actually filmed. This is because it's about a graphics card that I was modding for overclocking and managed to kill a few weeks ago. Anyway, I repaired it today, so I'd like to talk about that. So firstly, let's talk about the card. This is again a GTX 570 Wind Force that I got for about 30 quid at CEX a few years ago. Now, one of the things about me is that I do competitive overclocking, and so I begun to prepare this card for some mods. I replaced the cooler with a salvaged one from an EVGA GTX 770 SC, as before the card couldn't even hold 900 MHz in Escape from Tarkov without me requiring hearing protection. Gamewood's cooler was the worst cooler I've ever seen on a graphics card, and I'm currently using a reference RX 480. Although I did replace the original cooler. Anyway, putting the 770's cooler on the 570 allowed for up to around 960 MHz in EFT. If it could have held that in other games and benches, well, that would have been another question, as I ended up killing the card from a failed Vcore mod. So looking at the PCB, we can see two blue wires coming from the area around the chip. This chip is an ADP 4100 buck converter driving a 6-phase VRM. The volt mod that I tried that failed was connecting a voltage source to a feedback pin to spoof the voltage reading and allow me to control a Vcore, but I accidentally connected the voltage source to feedback return, which is the feedback's ground reference, and as such more amps went through the ground than was designed for. The ground trace was vaporized, although I didn't know that at the time, so I ordered some replacement chips from eBay, and they arrived today after about 2 weeks from China. So I replaced them today. Here's the old one. There's the replacement chip. Alright, let's get some flux on there. The thing should be coming off soon. Yeah, I can see the solder starting to melt. Oop. It's coming a bit wobbly now. Come on, there we go. have a look at that. Yeah, the joints look fine. Yep. On the back of the card, you can see two blue wires. The bottom one connects to pin 4 and gives me the signal on the enable pin of the chip. I was using this so I could find out if the chip was even getting the turn on signal. I was getting around 1.3 volts, which is kind of low. I was expecting in the region of 3.3 volts, as 3.3 volts is an easy voltage to get, as there are tons of regulators which output a 3.3 volt signal. Also, a lot of chips just use 3.3 volts or 5 volts anyway. So I checked the datasheet and it shows a comparator with an 850 millivolt reference, so I knew the chip was still getting the enable signal despite the lower voltage than expected. I had already probed all of the phase output pins, so I knew that the chip wasn't trying to provide any power, and I knew it wasn't the chip itself as I just put a fresh one in, so it had to be some other input to the chip. Also, because I'd done the volt mod, I knew that the damaged area was likely in the feedback circuitry. So I looked at the feedback pins and found the feedback return pin. I looked on the datasheet and it follows to VSS sense. VSS sense is the Vcore's sense ground reference. Essentially put, all I had to do was check if this was grounded. If so, it wasn't that pin. If it wasn't grounded, well, it should be, and I'd just have to tie it to ground. When I probed the pin's continuity to ground, there was none. Now the test point had been vaporized, so I had to scrape away some of the PCB mask to get to some of the trace, as it had been mostly destroyed. After some reconstructive surgery, I soldered a wire, that top blue one there, to the screw hole, which are always part of the ground plane. This grounded the feedback return pin. I then hooked up the card and it booted up just fine. Buildzoid likes to name his cards, so I decided to do mine. This one is Frankenstein, back from the Dead Edition. The reason for the name is simple. The card is made up from parts of a bunch of other cards. It has 2 nuts and bolts either side, and has been resurrected. I think the name is fitting for this card.